Hello and welcome to the distributed webcast. Obviously, the first thing is always going to happen. That's always first starter. So I want to say, first of all, thank you very much for joining us for the Distributed Republic webcast. We are exploring the impact of decentralization, Web3, digital, metaverse technologies on our social, economic and political systems. So our mission is to ensure that communities that can benefit most from the inception of these new technologies have access to resources, education and expertise to thrive in a digital world. This webcast, if you haven't seen us before, is a discussion format. So I'll be introducing you shortly to my guest, Alison. What we do is we try to make sure that we minimize jargon along the way, and we keep it so all of the answers are, very straightforward, very simple. Should be, if it's not something you've come across before, we want to make it as accessible as possible. However, we can't always get away from terminology within the Web3 space, and there seems to be a new word or new acronym developed every single day, and trying to keep up with it is an absolute nightmare. So we do have a really helpful Web3 terminology glossary. You could download it from my Stan store, which is stan.store/Jamie Bykov-Brett. It's produced by our friends at Cybergear, and it has over 200 words of terminology that's frequently used within the Web3 space. Please feel free to add your questions and comments in. We're on LinkedIn, we're on YouTube, and we're on Facebook for this episode. If you drop us a comment, we will be able to see it. We'd love to be able to answer your questions on the topic. And it's really exciting to be able to kind of go into these details with what's the information that's relevant for what you would like. So our webcast today is around preparing a generation for Web3 and the Metaverse. And I have my fantastic guest, Alison, here today. Alison, thank you so much for coming on the webcast and for giving us your time to be able to contribute to this. Would you like to do a bit of introduction about yourself and kind of why you got into Web3?
Cool, thank you. So firstly, massive thank you for inviting me to come on, and actually streaming on 3 channels in one go. That is probably the first thing that I've ever done that. So that's amazing. So I mean, massive question. Who am I? Alison Alexander. I am the co-founder of Metacampus. And when I say co-founder, that's like, so who else is there? So there's Pera Perez and Edu Pro. All 3 of us are working. Metacampus is a Web3 startup, started in January. As we all know, Web3 has been evolving. And as Jamie says, it grows every day. So every day I learn new things. But we are primarily focused on how do we help people make the transition from Web 2 to Web 3. But what we believe is that you can't just do learning in a kind of let's do 4 sessions and I know all about Web 3. What we believe is all about lifelong onboarding. So we have a platform, and what we do is we bring people who are in Web 3 into that platform to really have conversations, a bit like what you're saying now. This is a conversation. Mm-hmm. So we feel that people learn best that way. How do we have really in-depth conversations with those creators who are in Web3, living and breathing it? So we do that. We help companies like transform their practice, and with that, we're talking very much the bit that I feel that we miss on Web3 is it's a mindset shift, a cultural shift. Yeah, we've got the decentralization running along the bottom here. That's a real shift. So we do a lot about how to help people make that journey, and then the last thing, which is we help. Like activation, we say. So we help to bring more Web3 companies to the Web3 community. And so that really try to bring new and creative, but also Web3 startups with a social purpose. Social purpose runs all the way through, which comes to, why am I in Web3? Mm-hmm. So Web3 for me, I was inspired by Web3 literally last November. Pera sent me a document that showed how you could rebalance the world economics by the use of decentralization and tokenomics. And literally, I was blown away. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this can really change things. So from that point, all I believed is that Web3 is the tools of Web3, because Web3 isn't just something you're going to see on your system at some time, but the tools of it help us change the world. So for me, everything about Metacampus, our vision is, how do we unlock human potential? How do we make sure that we are bringing equity to the world? So that's what you're going to hear me talk about a lot today, hopefully in the great questions you're going to ask me, but that is what runs. If somebody cut me down the middle, that's what I'd want them to see, that literally it was about like equity. How do we unlock human potential? So important. I was a young person who lived in very working class background, very disadvantaged, and I want everyone from those backgrounds to be where I am today.
I think that's where we share a natural synergy of backgrounds and where we come from and how we got involved with it. As you know, I'm a youth worker by trade and trying to look at how we can make sure that people who might be marginalized because of centralized institutions can still participate through decentralized structures and a decentralized economy. And that can be game changing for lots of people who are currently unable to participate. So I love the work that you guys do, and it's really interesting to kind of learn more about it. And I'm very much looking forward to asking you some questions. So let's get started.
But before you ask me a question, can I just say, like, what I love is that's like, as I said to you, that was what I first did. I was a youth and community worker. So we have so much in common about that and about how, and what I love about Web3 is community has come back alive. It feels like to me in my kind of 30 years of working in the services, public services, we've come back around to community. So that is so great.
Fantastic. So first question then, how will Web3 and the Metaverse change the way that we live our lives? Big question. Let's start right off there with your high level concepts. What are we going for?
Okay, for me, Web3, firstly, I want to say it's going to change every part of our life. Yeah. And the evidence, if anyone's sitting there going, yeah, but why? So you've only got to look at the big four institutions and I say the big four companies like Deloitte, McKinsey, EY, PwC, and I use those as an example because they're the four companies that advise governments at a global level and private and public services. And all of them have heavily invested in the development of Web3 and Metaverse departments. And all of them are writing research that says Web3 is going to be used to change how we learn, how we play, how we entertain, how we shop, and how we travel. So if we say, what are the areas, I would say Web3 is going to change all those areas in which we do. And we've got the evidence base. So if somebody doesn't just want to sit here and say, oh, that's just what Alison and Jamie say, actually, they are the institutions that everybody buys all their services from. And they are the ones that people go to say, help me get to where we need to get to. So I want to say there are lots of Web3 companies and advisors like yourself, like us, like lots of people who can help you come into the Web3 world. Yeah. But so I think it's going to change how we do all of those. And therefore, there are so many permutations of how we learn, all of that. But we pick up those as we go through. But that's my big stab to start with. We are, and most importantly, we are all going to spend time in the metaverse. By 2030, everybody will be spending some time, not just Gen A, so the under like 15s, or Gen Z, the under like 25s. Everybody is going to spend some time in a metaverse platform.
There's a few points that I really want to drag out from that because I think it's really interesting. And first of all, a lot of the time when we're talking about Web3 and the metaverse, particularly with what's going on within the news and stuff at the moment, there can be some negative associations with it. But really what we're talking about is the future of the internet and the future of e-commerce. You know, how we're able to interact with these things in a different way, how those experiences are going to change for us. For example, if I'm going into a metaverse supermarket and I might currently use Amazon to do my shopping, well, actually that JPEG and a few different angles of a picture, you know, is going to be considered very 2010. What we're going to look at is being able to go, well, I want to be able to pick up that object. I want to be able to stretch it, and I want to be able to put it on in a digital environment and really erode those boundaries between our virtual and our material worlds. And that's what we're seeing more and more of. And going back to that change of spending habits that you were talking about as well, about how we're going to spend more time within metaverse spaces. There's a great example from Thomas, who's a guy that I absolutely love. He does a lot of work in virtual real estate like I do. And he was saying about how his kids were saying, hey, I think I need a new coat, I need new shoes. And this was a 4-year-old, 5-year-old. And they were like, yeah, but I don't understand. You've got a new coat, you've got shoes. Like, what do you need for? He's like, no, you don't understand. It's for my avatar in Roblox. Like, they need to have it. So we're already purchasing things for our avatars within these virtual spaces. And that kind of goes into that Gen A bit about what the expectation is and how much they're going to have participate within these virtual spaces.
And that's really important what you say, because, I mean, you've said things there that some people online at any point, or who might watch this, might say, virtual, like real estate? What do you mean? Yeah, like, again, you're talking a language that Gen A's and Gen Z who are on roadblocks, or even the older ones who are into games. But literally, that's the bit also about like onboarding people to Web3. People often think that we're talking there about finance and tech. And in fact, we don't. What we're doing is we're talking about real estate people. We are talking about accountants. We are talking about artists. We are talking about fashion designers. We are talking about marketeers. So if you look at every degree, and I'm going to say in England, but it will be the same in most countries, if you look at them, they all are all of those could end up with a career in the metaverse, which is an element of Web3. And I think that's so important that for people to understand. If anyone's there and is an estate agent at the moment, think about, you could be an estate agent in the metaverse environment.
Definitely. And it kind of ties into this idea about, if we were talking 20 years ago and we're going to say how much time that we spent online when we were at work, people would be like, spending 8 hours a day in front of a computer screen, that's just not how business is done. Whereas we've had a pandemic where it was literally the only way that business was done. So when we're talking about that change in on how people participate in digital spaces, we're really looking at how these things are evolving. And it's not that far-fetched when we think about how far we've gone with computers already from, the 1990s up until the point that we're at now, and how much they've been incepted into the workplace. So
and I think your
question,
social media, but just as we're doing that, your social media point is really good. And I do keep saying for the older people, Jamie, because like we kind of balance different age range, and it's really important because some of that does come to some of these questions too, that the Gen A's and Gen Z's are the ones who are moving into a social media world, which is the metaverse and the use of the Web3 tools. The people my age are the people often determining how people will apply things at the moment, whether it's we're leaders of companies, of public sector, of education institutions. And actually, it's so crucial that we gain that insight, isn't it, as to what this new world is. So if I think back to 20 years ago, I was like Facebook or like social media or Instagram. What are all of those? I'm never going to use them that much. To, as you say now, I want to say I probably check all of those 100 times a day easily. And it's just so important. If you ever felt I wasn't, and the other example, if you ever felt I won't call people to have conversations, I only ever go out and meet them, well, actually, that's what you do now. We've gone from meeting people in person, talking to them on the phone, to now we send them texts to communicate. And that's going to keep growing.
It's definitely a different way of participating. So next question is, how do we invest in the future of humanity and technology? I think this is very relevant to Metacampus and the work that you do.
Humanity, like that's an enormous question. How do we invest in the future of humanity? I mean, I think I want to take these two words together, humanity and technology, because I think we can advance humanity by being much more welcoming and comfortable with technology. Yep. Technology can help us break down silos. Technologies can help us empower the bankless to actually have access to resources. It can help us give people a voice. It can do lots of things. And so that will naturally enhance humanity. And so an example I want to just share is around voting. So at the moment, we don't use technology in the way we could to vote, whether on a local basis for a topic or on a global scale. Actually, if you use the blockchain, the tool of Web3 to do voting, you might take the world from where we currently have 30-40% of people in each country determining who runs the country and how we do things, to actually having 80 or 90% of the country voting to determine how we do things. And if you think of that, I think it could radically change how we see the world being run. So I think there's one thing: how do we capitalize on the growth of technology to bring more people into how we operate our world, how we operate our legal systems, our decision-making systems? Because I think when you do that, you advance humanity, because you actually have a lot more diversity and inclusion in how society is structured. And I think they're really important that we get that right.
And it goes back to one of the points that you said very early on, which is around Web3 and decentralization. Is it's such a mindset shift as well. We're talking about being able to perceive power in very different ways. I was at an event not that long ago with Lord Way, who is putting on something within the House of Lords around NFT London. And we were talking about ledgers and how society is built on ledgers. Up until this point, it's, from the very beginning, we had our abacus moving it across, or we've kept notes on stone tablets, and then you've moved to it being on centralized databases. And the whole evolution of decentralization is now we can put those on decentralized databases where we have that transparency. We can see how all of these contributions are made. We can monitor these transactions. We can make sure that they're secure as well. And that really changes the dynamics of how people are able to participate within society. And that's what blockchain gives us in a lot of different ways, and why we see the inception of DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, it coming into flow, where organizations go, actually, we can structure our whole organization based on this. So a huge interest in how it goes forward. So next question.
And just because what we both have at our heart is communities, if you think of the move or the shift to have much more community engagement, that in itself impacts on humanity. I think sometimes when we think of that, we think, right, what can we do for humanity? And it's such a big thing, we've got to change a law, but actually we've got to change our mindset as to how we do business. And the one thing ask, though, that I would, if we had any government departments watching from a global perspective, is we need to bring we need to give everyone access to the internet. I like to see it as the same as, we talk about utility in Web3 a lot, but I want to see Web3 being provided via the internet being seen as a utility, the same as gas, electricity, and water. And I know some people in developing worlds will struggle with some access to some of those already, but actually, if you give everybody 5G, it becomes the norm. Actually, that also changes how people can then make a living, how people can learn and earn, and therefore that will again come back to that point I started with of changing the economics of society.
Technology can be an amazing equalizer, and as I say all of the time, to a point of a fault for sure, which is, progress isn't progress if it's always the same people benefiting. And this is where having access to the internet is such an important point. And it reminds me, in the last general election, probably 2 general elections ago, we have them quite frequently in the UK.
We did. Yeah, right.
I remember there was an opposition policy that was put in the manifesto, which was that we were going to nationalize internet companies to be able to make sure that everyone could have it. And this was just before the pandemic. Everyone could have the internet. And I remember the newspaper headlines were all like broadband communism, taking us, to basically never gone. And then we had the pandemic. So all of those that need to participate online, and how many people from all sorts of different backgrounds were then marginalized even further, and had that marginalization enhanced by the fact that, or built upon because of the technology barrier that was there, which is such a big barrier sometimes to participation. I'm going to move forward onto the next one because we've got a few to be able to get through. So how do we build a decentralized future together?
We need everybody in. We need everybody in the discussion. That's one important thing. I was talking about regulation with people recently at a Web3 event, and people initially didn't like the fact that I was saying we need some regulation, or we need some policies or some legislation. And I do believe we need some of that to provide some protections. But what I don't want is I don't want centralized companies building that. So I first have a bit like as a plea to everyone who is passionate about decentralization, rather than to reject the notion of like legislation and regulation to help, that everybody comes to the table. Yeah, we really need everybody. Yeah, so that when we have new regulations, it's kind of that middle ground. Yeah, the only way we get that, otherwise we'll just get the same. I mean, I loved your statement, like we'll just get the same again if it's built by the same people, won't we? So I think that. I think we have to decentralization. People are like, what does that mean? It's a mindset, isn't it? You said earlier, going from centralized to decentralized. So that does go from singular control to everyone being in control. Yeah. And therefore we need to help people learn what that's about without being scared. People will immediately think, again, of my age, oh, we're going to communism, or we're going to this, or we're going to living in communes, or all of that, where everyone does it together. And actually, we need to have that real conversation, don't we? So it's about, how do we build it together? We need to have everybody in the discussion. We need to not get camps, decentralized versus centralized. We need to really challenge everyone to come together. We need to be listening to each other. Yeah. And therefore, then what we need to do is we need to help young people understand what it means by talking about it in schools. But we also need to have companies talking about it. It's that, like, again, that lifelong onboarding that we're talking about. You can't teach somebody a shift in mindset. I often say any focus on shifting from Web 2 to Web 3 means education, knowledge, skills, and mindset shift. And you need that. So without that, we'll kind of keep stumbling over it. So in that positive light, we need to get everyone in the room, and we need to provide everyone with education about it.
I think that message of inclusion there, and something that I always try to make sure that we're talking about, because lots of people are going to see this as a technology project. Web3 and the metaverse, it's a technology thing. And actually, that means that they feel that they don't have anything to contribute or to participate. We're talking about something that has so many implications for how societies might be formed, how they might be governed, how organizations might be formed and governed, that everyone does have something to be able to contribute to that discussion. And you don't need to be a tech head to be able to go, hey, this is what I understand. This is my intersection of what happens within the world and the skills that I've got and how I can contribute it within the space. So there will be that opportunity for participation, for sure.
The tech is the enabler, isn't it? Actually, it's like that's not the mission. It's like if you're running a business, you're looking at, like, what's our mission? Where do we want to get to? And what's the enablers? Tech is an enabler as to how and where we want to get to. And therefore, that's why it's important that it's not a single, let's talk to the tech people as to what this all means.
Definitely. So that leads on nicely to my next question, which is, what's some of the most important things that we can do to prepare children, young people for this new virtual world?
Okay. Firstly, I want to say the most important thing is those people who are responsible for children, whether it's as parents or educationalists, youth workers, social workers, anyone, any professional discipline, they need to understand and not be fearful of Web3. And they need to not see it as a tech issue. So firstly, we need to do that because they're the people who are helping our children and young people grow. And then, so we need them to become comfortable with it. So we need that onboarding. And then what we need them to do is to think about, okay, how can I use this future technology to teach the history? So our global education system focuses on reminding everyone about history in different ways. And also all the different subjects, whether that's English, mathematics, chemistry, science, language, all of that. It's all about what we've learned in the past. What I think we need to do most is to use the tools of the future to teach about the past. And the reason I think that's important is, as educationalists, we always have to be showing that we're thinking about the future. We're not afraid of the future, and therefore what we do is remove barriers. Now, we all know when we don't talk about something, it gets talked about behind, I'm going to say, the bike shed or in the corner or on Snapchat, or it does that. What we need to do is to help children prepare for that. We need it to be the normal conversation. The metaverse and the spaces children go into, Roblox, need to be talked about in every classroom. What is it like? Yeah, we need to use those new metaverse platforms to also take children in to learn about chemistry, to learn about history. I mean, there is a group in India who are using the metaverse to really show the culture to children and adults. So it's really being creative. But the most important thing for me is then how we build the metaverse, particularly I'm talking about, which is only one part of Web3, we do it safely. And that means the tech people who build it, now we do need the tech people to stand up and go, okay, what is it that I can do? What you can do is to build it in a way that offers me as a person protection. So I can be in my own space. Nobody can invade my space. Nobody can ever take that away. And that also I have a route as to where I can talk about things when something I experience doesn't go right.
Perfect. I think I want to be able to make sure we go on some of the comments that we've got here as well, but completely appreciate as well the need for my definition of metaverse is community owned, community governed, with data protection built into it through protocols that are already there, rather than having to try and regulate it and do it in reverse and try and work these things out once we've realized the social consequences of it. So I'm going to go to some comments here. We've got Oliver's comment. So what is a really important topic to create that mindset shift in people's and companies and to make a positive difference, which I think is really important. I know Oliver does a lot of work within the meditation space within the metaverse and using it as a tool for well-being. But there's a great question here from, I think it's Mateus, which is giving access to technology enough to push a mindset, or do we need to make much more deeper changes in our education and society? What do you think, Alison?
Absolutely. Yes. And I want to say, Jamie, without repeating all those things, I think this comment has come in, and I think we have been saying some of those things along the journey, that we totally agree with you about everything you've put in that statement. Technology is the enabler, but we need to be talking about it on our TV, in our radio, in our education, so that in every way possible, we are teaching people about what this mindset shift is. And we can't underestimate that. Web3 gives us some unique tools, but if we don't do the mindset shift, we're going to be using those tools in a centralized way, and that will not achieve what Web3 was seeking to achieve.
I think a really good example of that is FTX, who are a centralized institution who are, doing transactions for cryptocurrencies, and they're creating such a challenge between, they're a centralized institution manipulating decentralized regulation and governance to be able to make a profit, and they're working within that very linear, centralized way, and you can see the damage that can be done because of institutions doing things like that.
Definitely.
That is all the time we've got. So just want to kind of wrap up and say thank you for joining us, Alison. Really appreciate your time, your insights, your energy, and the work that you're doing.
Thank you. So lovely. And thank you for everyone who joined, who asked us some questions. Please do keep asking us questions and contributing to the conversation.
Definitely. So if you want to join our community or apply to be a guest on the show, just go to www.distributedrepublic.xyz or follow Distributed Rep on the majority of social channels. And you can download any resources that we've got already developed from my perspective at a Stan store, so stan.store/Jane Bykov-Brett. And if your organization would benefit from workshops and information like what we're doing in this webcast, then get in contact, because we'd love to be able to provide you with a bit more of a curriculum to support you on this journey as well.
Bye.
Fantastic. Bye.